Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I'd like to pass it off to Superintendent Degner. He has something he would say.
Hi, good evening, everybody. First, I wanted to say happy Black History Month. In February, we know we celebrate Black history in the district and throughout. And the first thing, though, I'd like to do in regards to that is to make an apology for the district's social media post on February 4th, 2021. With the intent of celebrating Black History Month, the original post included a quote from poet Amanda Gorman and two white hands embracing. The post did not include a visual representation of the Black community that we wanted to recognize. And so while this was unintentional and the original post has since been deleted, we know it was insensitive and a failure on the district's part. We're sorry for any harm this caused or for the harm it did cause. And the district remains committed to our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And so while this post ultimately and unfortunately fell short of our standards, we do not intend on wavering in our work to improve in those areas. And so we just wanted to make special note of that this evening and take a minute to recognize that. And we've been doing work in the district about learning how to call in and call each other out when things don't go well in the area of equity. And this is definitely an opportunity for us to lead by example in that regard through an unfortunate situation. So thanks for that, President Eystone.
Thank you, Matt. So let's go ahead and move into our agenda. The first thing we have up is our student representative update. And first up, we will have Tate High. I think Chris is here.
Hello.
Hello.
Should I just go? Or?
Yep, you can go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I have a couple items to report on tonight. To begin, Student Council is doing their best to spread a little love at Tate by encouraging students to send a note of kindness to other folks in the building. These Valentine's Day candygrams will be delivered to all students this upcoming Wednesday and Friday at lunch, just to help everyone make it through the cold winter days. Student Council also has created a student shout out board in the main hallway. It's a real confidence booster to walk by the board and see written words of praise from our teachers and peers. We'd like to thank the SAC staff for leading Student Council this year and working hard to keep our students in good spirits. Along those same lines, the entire staff of Tate is committed to writing postcards and positive office referrals for students. This postcard writing effort is part of our PBIS program, which is the foundation of everything we do at Tate. These positive behavior interventions create a welcoming school culture, and families love hearing about their students' academic and personal successes at school. This year, Tate staff have been sent over 255 postcards home to families so far. We are proud of all students at Tate who are hanging in there during this challenging time. And finally, we want to let you know that our Tate newsletter is now available on our website. Our newsletters highlight important dates and events at Tate and include information for families and samples of student work. So far, each of our newsletters has received 350 views. One feature of the newsletter is Warrior of the Month. This month's warrior is Kiara Wright. Kiara Wright is a sophomore and was nominated for Warrior of the Month by 4 teachers. Her superstition is that she can't break a pinky promise, and that pretty much sums up Kiara. She's loyal to her friends and to herself. She exudes all the values of caring, ownership, respect, and responsibility, and is working hard toward her goal of going to college. We are very proud of Kiara. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. Next up, I have Liberty High. I don't see Elizabeth Wagner there. Is there another representative from Liberty High that could raise their hand? If not, we can move on to City High. Likewise, I didn't see Catherine, so I don't know if there's a City High rep that would raise their hand. All right, we will move on to West High, and I see that Aditi is here, or believe that may be our rep.
Hi, good evening. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
My name is Aditi Borde. I'm a senior at West High, and I have a fairly short update for you all tonight. Last week, the speech and debate team competed remotely at the Peninsula Invitational Tournament. West placed as champions in the novice policy debate and also had some students qualify for the Tournament of Champions. West High's 1440 Interact and Community Service Club is currently raising money for the nonprofit organization Houses into Homes. And they're doing this through a Valentine's Day survey match for students, in which they can potentially meet up with, a new friend that they're supposedly compatible with on this test. And the results will come out in the near future. Cadenza, West High's classical musical club, has recently joined forces with UNICEF for a virtual concert and fundraiser. And the concert videos are still available online for others in the community to watch. West High's Big Dreamers Club is hosting 2 sessions of virtual conversations and a question and answer panel for current West High students to meet with past West High alumni about careers, dreams, and the future. And it's a great way for students to connect and meet with potential mentors. And 35 BPA students presented at the virtual regional competition in late January. And all the students will advance to the virtual state competition that is held in mid-February as well. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you very much. I'm going to give one last shout out for either Liberty or City High. If there's a rep and they want to raise their hand so we can hear from them. I'll give you a second. All right. I'm not seeing any, so let's go ahead and move on to our ICA update and pass it off to Brady.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, President Ison, Vice President Malone, directors, and administrative team. I'm Brady Shutt, the president of the Iowa City Education Association. For those who are here as attendees who might not know, I'd like to first just thank the board for the ability to have a workday on Friday, this Friday, the 12th of February. As you're going to see later, if you haven't looked at it already in the Return to Learn section of this meeting, we did have some student movement across our learning models, which makes that day, the work day, instrumental to the success that we're going to have when we move to the 100% on-site 5 days a week for students starting on Monday, February 15th. So thank you. There's not many, we've been sort of talking to other teachers around the state, and even though districts might be able to do this, there are very few, if any, who are willing to do it. So we're really appreciative that you're willing to do that on behalf of the students. So I'd also like to thank, and this is, I'm sort of rolling through our agenda, but the legislative priorities, the inclusion of the restoration of Chapter 20, we're deeply appreciative that that has remained as an item. That's a true statement in your belief in, as an administrative team, as a school board, in the value of our partnership and in that law pre-2017. Our legislative priorities are in line with yours. 4.5% SSA as an investment in public education is absolutely necessary, and saying no to vouchers is critical at this point. So we also, ICEA, would like to urge the public, now is the time to contact legislators. Those bills are still pending, but they're moving quickly. So if you know legislators, if you've never done that, it's very easy to do it. So we'd urge you to contact them to encourage an investment in public education. And the last thing I'd like to just give a shout out to our we have a fantastic health partners all across our county. Our Johnson County Public Health folks have been wonderful in giving advice and expertise throughout the pandemic to us. And UIHC, I think, deserves a special shout out. Chase Ramey and Jessica Jimerson and Kristen Peterson have done a fantastic job, as has Superintendent Degner, in building a relationship with UIHC. And there was really a great success with the rollout of the vaccines to ICCSD staff last Friday, and then still moving. So just a special shout out. The feedback that I got, people, it's sort of quite emotional moment. And I think the feedback I got, UIHC people were, the consummate professionals, and you realize the work that they've been doing, and just to be able to have that connection with a wonderful institution is really fantastic. So thank you to Chase and his team for helping us with that, and to UIHC. So thank you.
Thanks, Brady. Appreciate it. Now we will move on to community comment. If you would like to speak to us, you can use the raised hand feature, and I will call on you, and Kim will give you the rights to speak, and you will have 4 minutes to address whatever topic you would like. So we can do that now if anybody would like to raise their hand. No hands are going up. So I am going to move on into our next item, which is the approval of the rest of tonight's agenda. So I would entertain a motion for that.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda for February 9th, 2021.
Second.
All right, Kim, I'm ready to vote.
I'm an aye vote on that, Kim. I don't know why it's not letting me log in.
Thank you, JP. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. We'll move into our consent agenda. Did anybody have any questions they'd like to share after reviewing the bills?
I didn't have any questions. I reviewed the bills. I just do that out of habit, but I didn't have any questions.
Okay, are there any items that directors would like to pull?
Hi, Sean, this is Charlie. Maybe item 6. So I just want to comment on it, but I think we have to pull it to comment. Okay.
All right, we can pull item 6. Anything else? All right, then I would entertain a motion for the consent minus item 6.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. Kim, I think we are ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
I'm a yay vote.
Thank you, JP. All the votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, so we can look at item number 6, which is the School Improvement Advisory Committee. Charlie?
Thanks. I just want to note that Matt at a request added a equity committee representative to the School Improvement Advisory Committee. And I just wanted to thank him for doing that. And just note to the public that that committee now has a member of the equity committee as a member going forward. And I would move to approve item number 6.
Second.
All right, thank you. Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Yay.
Online voting is open. Thank you, Director Clausen. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks, Kim. JP, that sounded more like you were very excited about it with just a yay.
It is exciting to have an equity member on the committee.
That is true.
It's frustrating
Sean,
not being able to log into board docs.
Sean, if I can just mention on that too, just to point out, we added the co-chair of the equity committee, Jane Finch, on there, but we also had Deja Taylor on there, who is a West High student and also is a co-chair of the equity committee. So we've got both co-chairs on there. I hadn't noted that in the original doc and I should have, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how Deja has time for all of it. She does. She's amazing. Let's move on. We have a public hearing, so this is when I get to throw it over to Director Malone.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed conveyance of district property with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation to Mid-American Energy Company for an underground electric easement at Liberty High School. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on January 29th, 2021. Are there any comments from the board? Is there anyone from the audience that would like to advise or provide comments to the board on the proposed underground electric easement? If so, raise your hand. Okay. I think that concludes our public hearing.
Let me unmute so I can move on into the rest of the agenda. Thank you, Director Malone. Next up, I'm going to throw it right back to you. We have a quick policy and governance committee update.
Just to remind the rest of the board member, we have worked our way through the policies, but there are quite a few revisions needed. And so I'll throw it to Chase for an update, because the hope is that the revisions that's needed require the effort from multiple different directors in different divisions. So it is a heavy lift, considering everything else they have to deal with in order to get us ready to return to learn at 100%. But I'll let Chase provide an update on where they're at, because our hope is we're going to meet in March.
Sure. Good evening. It's nice to be with you all this evening. And Director Malone, I gave a nice recap. We have been making some revisions. I worked with Brady and the ICA on a number of the ones that impacted personnel. And we circulated a document just this week to get eyes on some of the outstanding policies that still need to be reviewed or revised. I do appreciate Rethina mentioning some of the work that's going on, but we are fitting this in and believe we will be able to meet the timeline of being ready to present these back in March in more of a final form. So I know it's been a long haul. We appreciate everybody's collaboration, work, and patience as we have gone through it, but the finish line seems to be in sight. And so I think we'll be in good shape and ready to present the full slate at the March meeting.
Thank you.
Any directors have any questions on that? All right, let's go ahead and move on. We have a presentation for our quarterly financial report. I assume I'm going to toss that over to Les, but is anybody else going to lead off, or right to Les? All right.
Thank you, Sean. I don't really have a whole lot of comments regarding the materials presented. I think they stand for themselves. We're continuing to work through this year and manage our budget, just like we're trying to manage everything else that's going on around us and all of the other factors. One of the things that is not in this document at this point in time is most of the impact of the federal stimulus dollars. We are still working as an administrative team through that and how most of those will be spent. We've got a pretty good plan in place for the first 1.6 million that was presented to the district last May, and we're working through that. But this next round that came in December, while it has equal opportunity for the same type of expenditures and actually opens up a little bit of more flexibility for the district, we're continuing to meet and determine the best steps for those, as well as how we can use some of those dollars to manage our budget going forward for the next 2 years. We also recognize that, you know, the SSA in Des Moines that Brady alluded to in his comments needs to be advocated for as well. And so at this point in time, we haven't changed any of our estimates going forward just because we don't know what's coming out of Des Moines. As soon as those are, we will provide updates to the administrative team, and our next quarterly report will have all of that information updated. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Directors, any questions? I'll go ahead and go. I know I always scroll straight down to the bottom of, let's see, what page is this? Page 11, I guess, and look at the red, yellow, and green colored squares to see where we're at. And I'm noticing it looks like on the projected for 22 and 23, there's $1 million in there in anticipated budget reductions and adjustments. Is that similar to what we had to do a couple years ago, or yeah, was it 2 years ago now, with a much bigger number to deal with, or is that, am I misreading that?
No, Sean, that would be accurate. And we had that same information in the last quarter as well. Just as it's a little bit of a placeholder, if you will, to recognize the need that when SSA does not come in at the levels that we want, it may require us to make budget adjustments. And we don't want to lose sight of that need to have that fiscal responsibility. And so if the 2.5 comes through, it will certainly change some of those numbers in both years and soften the impact of those, as well as the impact of those federal stimulus dollars that we're able to use for some of those funds. For an example, the additional nurses that the board approved, I believe it was in October. We're planning on using these federal stimulus dollars for those positions in the short term. And then work those staff into our overall budget plan as we move forward in 2, 3, 4 years out. So this is not intended to be shock value, but it's also intended to provide the reality that given the current ongoing budget and the enrollment decline in October of 2020, it does impact our budget for multiple years going forward.
Celeste? Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to note that adding the additional nursing staff was not a totally physically irresponsible act on our part anyway. So.
Not at all, Charlie. If it came across that way, I do apologize.
No, not from you. Thank you.
All right, if there's no further comments, we'll move on into return to learn. I know that's why a lot of folks are here tonight, so I'll pass it off to Matt.
Thanks, Sean. Good evening again, everybody. So yes, we've been quickly preparing for the transition to 100% learning on February 15th. Thanks for Brady for expressing the appreciation again for the 12th. And I'd like to thank you to the board as well for allowing us to move forward with that decision. I think that will be a good one for our staff as a chance to make sure they're well aligned and prepared to deliver services right away on the 15th, as well as have their buildings ready to go. There is quite a bit of furniture changing we're needing to do as we started the year with a little different model, knowing we wanted to try to create as much distancing as possible. And now we need to make sure we have enough desks and physical spaces, obviously equipped for the kids too. And so tonight, what we'd like to do is kind of start on the academic side and have Amy talk a little bit about numbers and what we saw for those transition points, or what we will see for those transition points on the 15th. And then again at the trimester, as we begin third trimester, where that movement shook out at, and then talk about the staffing work that we've been engaged in kind of frantically here over the last several days to make sure that we're ready to go for the 15th. And then we'll shift more to the operations side with Chase and have him talk a little bit about some of the health and safety components and give you a little bit more of a comprehensive vaccine update. I'm sure you've seen some of our communications around that, and we've hit that in a high level before, but we'll talk a little bit more about that this evening too. And then of course, take any of your questions. But with that, I'll turn it over to Amy and let her walk you through those couple slides that are loaded for you on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Matt, and good evening, directors and everybody else that's with us tonight. Before I talk a little bit about what we saw in the way of enrollment changes and where we're sitting at in our staffing process, I just want to give a shout out to our staff, and it's really touching every single employee group with the kind of change that we're encountering come next Monday. So from our tech staff who's working on the backside to help with enrollment and staffing and Power School, to our food service, to our transportation folks, custodians, facilities, our teachers that are prepping for new students in their classes, for our paras getting ready for different schedules, you know, everyone, our administrators helping to, you know, move through these changes. I just appreciate all of that. And of course, and also their flexibility. And I would be remiss in not thanking our parent group too, because we know this is impacting some of our parents, those that elected to make changes and those that didn't elect to make a change, but you know, they see a teacher change coming too. And I would also just echo what Matt said about Brady's comment, and we too so appreciate that work day this coming Friday for our staff to be able to prep and prepare. So thank you again for that. So as we look at enrollment, I have 3 slides in there that show the changes upon us for elementary, junior high, and high school. And you can see there that on the elementary slide, we have a total of 389 students coming to campus by the beginning of the trimester. Kim, if you would go to that next slide. There we go. So we have 389 students that will be joining us over those 2 dates, and 115 students going from our current campus in our AB model, hybrid model, to online. At the junior high level then, we're not seeing, of course, as much change. We only have a couple of grade levels there, but we have 101 students that are coming on site and 66 that will be going online. And at the high school, we see 145 students coming to campus and 227 going online. So that's a little bit of what we're have been working through. And in particular, I'd go to the next slide, Kim. We've been concentrating heavily on the elementary staffing component, and we'll talk about why we have more of a focus there and less at secondary. And what we really tried to do as we went through the elementary staffing is forecast both changes. And so as we will welcome some teachers new to campus or from online programming to on-site next week, we've really tried to account for students that will come on the 15th of February as well as 3/11. And so there won't be another series of changes for elementary. And of course, unless numbers would dictate something different to happen. But by and large, we intend to have elementary staffing set for next Monday, and then we would anticipate experiencing minimal changes after that. And just to give you a comparison of what happened at second trimester versus what we're looking at this transition, while we're calling it a 3rd trimester transition, it really is truly happening, you know, next week on the 15th there. So roughly 20 teacher changes occurred between 1st and 2nd tri. And during this change right now, we're right at around 13 teacher changes, and looking at also the support of two of our building subs there. In doing that, then I know we had a question last week about the RAM, and you know, there's some guiding principles that we used. I would say that, you know, kind of 4 things that are all kind of mixing in or we're at play here were us to trying to adhere to the RAM as much as possible. Thinking about our health and safety considerations, making sure our classes weren't getting too large. And then one of the key pieces is the minimal staff and student disruption as possible, and then to keep it all cost neutral. So again, those 4 things working towards sometimes against one another and sometimes for one another, but those were the things that we were thinking about. And so as we were making these changes this time, we took we allocated FTE back to an on-site section if anybody went over a RAM 5. So even if you weren't a RAM 5 school, you were 2, 3, or 4, anybody that was over a RAM 5 level. And just as a reminder, that would be kindergarten at 24, 1st and 2nd grade at 28, and then 3rd through 6th grade at 32. The other thing that we did is we had some really small class sizes in the district, and to take care of those for the 1st and most of 2nd trimester, we actually had teachers teaching 2 different grade levels, and they'd been fantastic through this and agreed and in certain cases had asked to do it. So for example, they might have had a class of 3rd grade students on A days, but they were teaching 4th grade students on B days. And we needed to make those whole. We saw their numbers tick up as such that it wasn't going to make sense for them to be able to do that. So that was another commitment we made to making those classes whole. And then the other thing that we looked at, of course, is within the RAM, our RAM 2, 3, and 4 schools, we did have some that were maybe 1 one student over what their typical RAM would have been, where we might have allocated an FTE in the past. And what we've done so far, as we've combed through this, is taken anybody that was within the RAM. If they were 3 or more over their traditional allocation, then we look to award FTE there. Since last Wednesday evening, of course, we've had a few late requests trickling in from parents. And so we're trying to do our best to see who we can still accommodate, knowing that, you know, we have some wiggle room to do that. So we'll take another look across everything that we've accomplished as of today. Tomorrow, we'll run some new enrollment reports again to see where this is all fallen out. We feel like we're in decent shape, but again, I would just go to, you know, we know that there is some disruption happening, and, you know, for some of our parents, the 389 or the 500 and some that we're asking for that, you know, they were anticipating that. And, but some of our families weren't when we're collapsing, you know, online sections and that teachers coming on site. So that can be a hard thing as well. Nick, I'll have you talk about the secondary staffing slide, please.
Thanks. And at the secondary, it's a little bit different, obviously, than the elementary, because we're not always talking about an entire teacher moving. It's more about section changes and different things of that nature. So in the second trimester, we had 18 section changes in the high school and 12 section changes at the junior high. And that could have impacted that many individuals, or it might have been less depending on who we were drawing from to help balance that out. We really feel like the work we did during that second trimester helped kind of write the course and put us in a good place. And also, if you looked, our numbers didn't have the same, the secondary numbers didn't have the same kind of movement as the elementary, where there was such a larger number of people coming on site. So our transitions will all occur at the secondary level at the trimester. There's some specific course scenarios that we're going to need to look at, just because it may have been a singleton or a one section course offered in a building that has gotten large, and we need to look at that and some of those things. But overall, we really feel at our first glance, we're going to see kind of what is the typical changes that occur at the secondary level. There's always some movement of teachers and always some differences as students pick their courses, or as trimester courses are offered or not offered, and different things. So we're kind of anticipating what would be more of a typical movement, with maybe a little bit more due to some of the student movement onto the online program at our high school level, but overall not as significant as it was during the second trimester.
Yeah, and with that, we would take questions. Thank you, Nick.
Amy, this is Charlie. Can you give us an idea of about what percentage of elementary students are still online?
Sure. Gotta look at one other document here. So we have about 63% remaining or coming on site, and 36% remaining online. And I think we probably saw a high there of around 42%, between 40 and 42% at the elementary level. And then for secondary, if you're going to ask that next, we're at 58% on site and 42% online. Okay,
thanks. And so can you give us an idea of, in the elementary students, what number of classes have students above 25 or 26 students per class? Or would have a lot of classes like that, or not? Or
I would have to go back to count those, Charlie, but I can say that we do have, you know, several that are above 25.
Are you looking at just on-site or online, Charlie?
on site. Okay.
On site.
Yeah, we have several. Okay. I'd have to go back and do the math, but we have several.
Do we have an idea if those are scattered evenly throughout the 21 buildings, or not, or is it hard to say?
I would say they're scattered across all RAM levels. You know, some of our lower RAM schools would have sections above 25, and as well as our upper, you know, RAM 5 schools.
And then finally, I'll stop torturing you in a minute here. Is it, do we have any real options, any actual options available to us to reduce the number of students in those larger classes?
Sure. What that would take, Charlie, is us really going back into the online program sections and even collapsing them more. And so we have said from the onset that we would allow those online program sections to go up to RAM 5, so 24, 28, 32. We could do that, and we could probably get more FTE to be able to, afford to bring on site, but it's going to cause disruption, and it's going to cause a lot of disruption, not only for the kids that are losing their teacher or being shifted to another teacher, but the kids that are coming on site. And so that is really the crux of all of this work that, we're trying to just balance and have minimal disruption. I can tell you too, that we sent out a form to our principals yesterday, just asking 2 questions. And one was around trying to get a handle on if any of the changes that we were making or asking to be made would have impacted a kiddo for the 3rd time. We certainly didn't want anybody to have a teacher, a 3rd teacher this school year. So that was one thing we were trying to be really cognizant about. And then the other thing is one scenario, there's so many scenarios that you can run through in your mind, but we have a scenario where you might have a student that's in the online program right now, and they were electing to come on site, but not until the 3rd trimester. And my question to the team was, do you have any kids in that situation where their online program or their online classroom teacher, their class is being collapsed, one of those 13 that was coming on site? And so just also trying to get a handle on that, and then how we would problem solve if that was happening, because that would also create a situation where a child might have a 3rd teacher. And so we're problem solving that as well.
Okay, thanks. So I gather from my understanding that there are a number of factors that are interfering with our desire to get all of the online students in as small as classes as possible, considering that we've got 38 or so % elementary students doing online work.
And do you mean our on-site classes, Charlie?
Yes, I'm sorry, on-site classes, right?
Right. Right. It would create a lot of disruption. It would create a lot more movement than we're looking at currently.
Okay, thank you.
We could do it, but that's what would happen.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Other directors have questions on this topic? All right. Kick it back to Matt. Do you have other topics we want to cover?
Yeah, we'll shift it over to Chase. I know he wanted to talk to you about some of the health and safety components the team's been working on, the updated Return to Learn guide, and then also just a general vaccine update like we had talked about from the onset. So Chase, you can take it away.
Thanks, Matt. I am very excited to talk about the vaccine update. It is exciting. I appreciate what Brady shared, but we will start with the Return to Learn guide, and I'm not going to go through the document word for word this evening. I've actually kind of fast forwarded to where the health and safety protocols section begin. And really, this is just more of a reminder or a refresher that this document lives on our website already underneath our COVID information. And this was the document we put together for Return to Learn at the beginning of the school year. Amy went over some of the academic protocols the last couple of meetings, and we not only updated those, but we also updated the health and safety protocols. And I'm just going to flip through a couple of the pages, and so you can see the different categories and the extensive nature of these that we had in place at the beginning of the year. And really over the last couple of weeks, led by Kate Callahan, we've gone through and we've reviewed these to see where we are on them, to see the ones that are working that we want to continue to highlight and put at the forefront. Last week, we had the opportunity to talk to you about a couple of new ones that we're putting in place, one being around our PPE and the N95 masks being available for staff, and then also the travel restrictions that the CDC has put in place regarding individuals or families that travel internationally. The rest of the information that you see on these pages are things that were in place for the majority of the year. And why we think that's important is that as we invite more students back onto campus, we want to bring these pieces back to the forefront to remind our family of the strategies that we are utilizing, the cleaning that we're doing in the evening and on the weekends, the cleaning supplies that are available for our classroom teachers, our specials teachers, the trainings that are available on that. And so to that end, there is also a companion document that is our staff guide to Return to Learn that we've updated to provide that information. There are not a lot of new strategies. And as Matt has talked about, and Amy and others, is that we understand that as we invite more students back to campus, that's an exciting opportunity for many of our families. But also at the same time, that provides us some additional challenges around health and safety. Charlie, one being kind of what you were alluding to about some of our larger class sizes. We recognize that it will be more difficult to social distance in some of our classrooms. And Jeff and Dwayne and his team have been working diligently with principals to try to maximize space and looking at ways to use every part of our school buildings instructionally, if we can, to try to maximize that social distancing as much as possible. And so while unfortunately we don't have a lot of new techniques that we can bring forward, we believe that we have some great strategies in place. We thought it was important at this time of the year before we start the 5-day-a-week on-site program to review those, to polish that document up and to republish it so that families and staff can see the strategies that we are using as we return to our standard enrollment for about 60% of our students. Before I go into vaccines, I'll pause there for any questions that board members might have around the health and safety protocols.
So just a quick question, Chase. So students will, for lunch and for art, music, and PE, they'll still go to those places and have that? Or are they going to be, I don't want to use the word confined, but are they going
Sure.
to be in their classroom the whole day?
So that's a great question, and we are going to continue to allow for students to rotate at specials. But Ruthina, one of the things we're trying to do, understanding the new dynamic, is provide some flexibility for principals and for teachers to collaborate on the approach that they think is best for that classroom and for that school. With the variety of different configurations of all our schools, we know we can't take a one-size-fits-all process. And so, at this short time, we've had a lot of those discussions. And so we don't want to arbitrarily say it has to be done this way or it has to be done that way. We really want to focus on utilizing spaces that provide for the maximum amount of social distancing and allow for cleaning to take place. And so you might see some schools where they do rotate for specials. You might see others where the teacher and the principal say, you know what, it might be better if we do art or music in the classroom. The same is true for lunch. We're going to try to use a variety of spaces for that. We know with more students that will allow for less social distancing. However, some of the pieces that we have in place to help with health and safety will remain there. Food being prepackaged or being served by our lunch staff rather than some of the self-serve models that we had in the past. So we are going to try to keep some of those protocols that we've seen work here with us for the spring.
Okay. And then as far as visitors, so is that policy remaining that we're limiting visitors? And by that, I mean, say, classroom parents, do
Ruthina,
we allow parents inside classrooms?
Ruthina, it's like you had my talking points for the night and you realize that I forgot the last couple, because that was another one that we do need to point out. And I think it's something that we've heard a lot, and I get it, like people are excited that more students are coming back to campus. And so we've heard a lot of those requests. Hey, does this mean that you're going to invite your community partners back in? Does this mean that visitors can come back in? You talked about room parents. And unfortunately, the answer is no. And because health and safety continue to be at the forefront, and while we have more students on campus, that really makes it even that more important that we focus on our health and safety protocols. And by having more students in the building, unfortunately, that means we need to keep the number of people that adults, people from the community there, limited. And so we do not plan on changing our volunteer or our visitor process at this time. We know that our community partners play a huge role in our student success. And so Laura Daly and her team and Corinne Frank and others have worked really hard to find ways to bring them in virtually or through other avenues because we know those connections are important, Diane and to her team as well. But we just really feel like from a health and safety perspective, we need to continue to prohibit community partners and visitors from coming into schools. I appreciate you bringing that
Yep,
up.
totally understand. Last question. Since masks are still required in our buildings, do we have enough for children who show up and they forgot their mask or their mask is wet or it fell off their face and now it's contaminated? Can you just talk about that?
Sure, we do. We are replenishing our PPE supply, whether that's masks or soap for washing hands or hand sanitizer, and we continue to monitor that so that we never get in a situation where a building runs out. Jeff and Dwayne and their team are on top of that, and so we will make sure that every building is fully stocked before the 15th. But that's not the only time we'll check on that. We'll continue to reach out to buildings to make sure if they have a need that we can supply that for them. So whether it's on February 15th or on May 15th, if a child needs a mask, we'll have one available for the child.
Chase, to go back to Ruthina's questions about visitors, what about coaches of extracurricular activities who are not associated with the school building? Will they be allowed inside?
So Lisa, yes and no. Our community coaches that's what we call individuals that don't have another role with the school district that are on an employee contract, so they're in a paid coaching position, they will be allowed, and they've actually been allowed to participate in practice. If they are volunteer coaches, no, we are still not allowing volunteer for classroom or extracurricular activities.
So Chase, this is Charlie. I'm sorry, Sean, if other directors want to have questions, please interrupt me. Okay. A couple of things, I guess. One, as we all know, the CDC is supposedly going to issue new guidance for safe school openings this week sometime. And do we have I assume our health and safety committee and the staff will pay close attention to that guidance and see what, if anything, it suggests that we need to do that we're not doing, or we don't need to do that we are doing.
Absolutely. Kate's done a fantastic job, and kudos to her committee, because Charlie, as you know, and the board members know, this is so fluid that we get new directives, it seems like, once a week. And Kate reaches out to that committee, and they are willing to come together and review and see what things they think are ones that we need to adopt and workable in a school setting. And so they will be be on top of that and monitor that. Kate, do you want to add anything about the new guidance or the health and safety committee in general?
I would say, we are always looking at the recommendations from CDC. I have some ideas in the direction they may be going, but I'm not prepared to discuss those at this time, but I can assure you that we will be continually reviewing those and making modifications along the way.
Thank you. So,
Charlie, can I jump in there?
Sure.
Before you ask the next one, I think just one thing to probably be open and transparent about too is just the philosophical disconnect on what may come from the CDC and what we're being asked to do on the state level, right? And so I think that'll be a piece for us to monitor. And I know our team will look at that and try to do as many of those things as we can, but we've got some pointed questions from community members and parents this week about, a blanket yes or no, we'll be able to follow that. And it probably won't be that clean. It'll probably be, we'll do our best, to meet those standards. But I think the best way to put it is that philosophical disconnect between how, the guidance we're receiving from the state and the expectations from the state of Iowa, and then what we'll receive from the CDC about safe reopening of schools says. And so I just think that's a piece we need to be open about and transparent, that those may not line up very well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I agree with you. I'm not implying at all that we're going to be able to implement CDC guidance. In fact, I'm totally convinced we're not going to be able to do that. However, one element of that guidance may go back to distancing, or look at distancing again. And as I understand it, we have the data in front of us now to indicate, to suggest that not all, especially elementary students, not all elementary students are going to be in classrooms where those classrooms follow the current guidance on physical distancing. And if that is to be the case, I'd suggest to me, I would suggest that maybe we need to go back and, or that we may need to really look at our ability to get larger numbers of students in classes into smaller numbers of students in classes, even though that, as Amy, I think, said so well, that has educational repercussions that are not necessarily good for the students or good for the district. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, and I don't know where we will be 2 weeks from now as we start to look at the infection numbers that may or may not, hopefully don't, but may actually change adversely.
I'd be interested to hear other board members' thoughts on that too. I mean, the thing I would say, Charlie, is I think that has some pretty passionate responses from parents that have chosen online and, believe that it would be the most consistent approach this year for their family, as that is something we stated early on. And even through this transition, as we tried to limit those disruptions, we know the disruptions still happen to those folks. And if we were to do another wave of that and teacher changes, I understand, what your point is about trying to provide that benefit of getting those class sizes smaller in the schools. But that would have some definite impact to families that have been online and tried to stay online. And if we were going to change those teacher and student sections up again, I think there's going to be I would anticipate there being a very passionate response from several individuals in that online world right now.
Yeah, I mean, my response, Charlie, is that these parents have chosen to send their kids to school. They've made this choice. And I feel like Matt and the rest of the team have been very upfront that class sizes are not going to be tied to the traditional RAM in all cases, because we're running two different educational delivery models, and it is a tough year. I have to tell you, as a parent who is going through a teacher change, I want to minimize the changes, the teaching changes as much as possible. These are traumatic for the kids, especially the young kids. They're difficult for the parents. And the people that you're impacting with these changes are the online parents, who in many ways have stepped up to try to help this district out. So if you continue to make teacher changes for the on-site classes, you will continue to negatively impact your online students and families. And I really think that those families have borne a lot of extra labor, extra costs in educating their kids at home this year. And at this point, it's really unfair to ask them to make more sacrifices for families who are choosing to put their kids back, knowing that we cannot meet the expectations that we would like to.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And I'm not fundamentally disagreeing with what you're expressing and voicing. I would think that we would look as closely as we can with as much data as we can gather locally about what additional risks there may be from not being able to maintain the distancing CDC guidance. And it may be that we cannot. We may decide that the risk is relative is somewhat less than what I'm thinking it might be now. And it may be that if the risk is higher, that some families may choose to go ahead and go back to online from on-site. So again, I'm I'm hoping to maintain hoping to maintain some kind of a balanced approach here.
Yeah, I understand that, Charlie, and I think that's what we've tried to, when Amy was walking through those slides, I think that was really where we tried to show that it was a balanced approach, that we tried to hold a standard around trying to minimize disruption, but it wasn't completely possible to avoid disruption in all those circumstances, and that we looked for opportunities where, it even does go slightly above our different RAM levels to still stick with those section numbers. Instead of just collapsing online sections right away. But at the same point, trying to monitor and think about that. I think in a traditional year, the district's looking at those different RAM levels pretty closely. And this year is a little bit different as far as trying to monitor how many kids are just in classrooms and in buildings, not necessarily staying true to the different RAM components all the time like we would in a typical year, because we're in a health and safety issue and working through a pandemic. So I hear what you're saying about a balanced approach, and we use that data to drive those decisions every day, and that's really where we've been focused on that. So JP, I'm sorry, I think I jumped in right as maybe I heard you trying to say something there too.
I was just going to reiterate that, it feels to me like we're balancing things as well as we can. My daughter started the year with something like 14 kids in her online class, and then added 22 on top of that. I don't know how many more we could add on, and that's at a very a low RAM school. And so, I think it's this balance between health and safety and the educational experience. And at some point that online, how many kids can one teacher handle in an online format? I think we have to be realistic there. And the other realistic thing is we're not going to be able to social distance, and it won't be as safe. I just think that's the reality. We don't have more classrooms. We don't have more teachers. We can't just make our online section 60 kids. That doesn't make any sense. And so the truth is, and I do think there's some parents who don't have a choice. They have to send their kids to school. They're just, and they maybe hybrid. I was very happy to provide that hybrid model when we could for those parents who truly don't have a choice. They have to go to work. And now, I feel for those parents that have to send their kids into a less safe situation. And unfortunately, I think we're going to do the best we can with what we've got, but we've been handed, that there's one person responsible for this, and we've been handed rushing back to school without vaccines. And that's really where this is if we could only vaccinate our teachers and our staff, we'd be fine getting these kids back into school 100%. But this is what we're stuck with. And I think I appreciate the district being realistic and optimistic at the same time, because I think we got to put our best foot forward and do the best we can with the hand we've been dealt by the governor.
Yeah, I'll jump in with a comment, and then I do have a question. I think we've stated before, right? There's classes now that aren't able to maintain a 6-foot distance with half the kids in there. So I about guarantee you every single classroom in the district is not going to have that distancing available to them. I don't know how many you're going to have that can actually meet that distance. It's going to be pretty few and far between. And even if you collapsed the online classes a little bit more, you're not going to gain enough FTE to spread it across all of those schools that have larger class sizes. You might be able to affect a few of them, and the rest of them are still going to be on their own. So we are kind of in a no-win situation there, as JP said. So I think we are looking to do as much mitigation efforts as we can in those spaces. And I think the teams have done a great job doing those efforts, and we will continue to do that. So my question is, the on-site, and maybe this was covered and I missed it, but the on-site before and after school programs were operating with just the kids that were on-site that day, I assume, and are now going to have larger numbers. So are there rules changing around how they're going to be operating?
Yes, they are, Sean. And we've worked with Laura and Amy Mintier and their team and Joan, who coordinate with the BASP directors, as well as looking at the state guidelines. And so that is reflected in the document, some of those changes in the ratios. In the fall, it was 1 to 9. I believe it's up to 1 to 15 with the ability to run 2 cohorts in a space. And so that allows them to be able to serve more students in those spaces. And again, the BASP partners have been great about asking what our health and safety protocols are, how can they implement them. And so we know that is something that our families need. And so we have tried to update that to make that available. Kate or Laura, anything either one of you'd like to add on that piece?
No, I think you did a nice job covering that, Chase. The goal for us is to have students served in the cohorts as much as possible to minimize the risk of transmission.
And then Sean, to circle back to where you started your comments, I appreciate what you're saying about some of the challenges we already face. And that is one of the changes that we did make to the documents and to all of our documents, because we want to be transparent. And so we don't want to say there'll be 6 feet of space. And so we've tried to use terminology of maximize social distancing because we don't want to mislead families or students or staff. And so it is something that we're working hard on and trying to look at ways to mitigate risk and to maximize opportunity, but also to be very clear in our language about, we are going to maximize social distancing, but that there isn't going to be that 6 feet, as you said, in classrooms between every desk.
To that, maybe you were going to talk about this. Are we getting a number weekly as to our allotment of vaccines? Do we know what our this week will be, or
so
this week?
Yeah, I mean, that's next topic. I mean, and I think that one is exciting, but I don't want to cut off board questions on health and safety, but we can always come back. So Sean, that's a good segue. So last week we were able to facilitate the vaccination of 411 district staff members. Brady mentioned our fantastic collaboration and partnership with UIHC. We cannot thank them enough for what they've done to make that work, along with Johnson County. They've been given a huge task, and they've entertained all our questions, they've answered them, and they've really prioritized our staff. And so last week it was 411, and we were notified by Johnson County yesterday that the number will be very similar this week. So we are looking to vaccinate about the same number of staff members this coming week. One of the things we've been able to set up by our partnership with UIHC is that we do it all in one day. And so that day each week is on Fridays. We know that the second round, there might be some side effects to that second dose. And so having our staff vaccinate on Fridays is good because it gives them the weekend. It's also good this week because of that work day on Friday. And so staff will not have to be out of the buildings or their assignments at all. We don't know from week to week. And so what we've been doing and how we've been approaching it is sending an update to everyone in the district on Monday afternoons to recap what happened last week and what we project for this week. But unfortunately, we just can't project any further than that. But we're very excited to see that we had over 400 vaccinated last week. We anticipate that many this week as well.
So if I could put a bow on that, if we're getting roughly the same amount every time, and we're, as I recall, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 staff members that were interested in receiving it, and you're talking about a 2-dose system, we're looking at 8 to 10 weeks at that rate, right?
Yes.
I'm curious to what happens. I'm anticipating the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that is a single dose to really change the landscape of what not just the school community, but our whole community at large is going to go through to get vaccinations. So I'm curious how that plays out. But 8 to 10 weeks is a longer time to get that done than I think any of us are hopeful for. So as whatever we can do to push whoever we need to push, right, to increase that number or increase that speed, let me know and I'll start pushing. But I think that we need to make that very clear that it's going to be some time before we get everyone that wants it, particularly twice, right? So we all have
so
to.
Matt, I don't know if you want to comment on the advocacy piece. I'll let you handle that part, but I'll take the first part on the Johnson and Johnson. And Sean, you didn't ask the question, but that's probably the most frequent question that Kristen and I have gotten. And by the way, Kristen Peterson has done a tremendous amount of lift on this for us as we've collected information from staff and gotten that transmitted over to the UAHC. But one of the most frequent questions Kristen and I get asked is, which vaccine am I getting? And the county and the hospital both said, you can't answer that because you don't know. And so the county doesn't know what they're getting from the state, and then the hospital doesn't know what they're getting from the county. And so we're not able to really project out whether or not it's going to be Pfizer or Moderna or now Johnson & Johnson. And so I agree that that probably will change the landscape, but we haven't even begun to have those conversations because I don't think anybody really knows what that's gonna look like. Then on the advocacy piece, Matt, I'll let you take that part.
Sure. I would just say, I mean, I think that is an area where, we can all help each other as a board, continue to advocate for the district in that regard, that those vaccines need to come to the 1B group. They need to come to our public school educators to do that we wanted schools back open 100%, and that the staff members that serve our kids need access to those vaccines. And so I do think that's an advocacy piece that we need to continue to carry the flag on. We've sent numerous communications to the state regarding the 64,000 vaccines that were left from some of the 1A group, especially the long-term care facility workers, to try to get those dosed out to us. We are hopeful. It's hard to promise, and we can't promise anything, but when you forecast the timeline, Sean, I do think that we're hopeful and optimistic that a larger influx will come at some point of that, but we just don't know. And we're just subject to the number they tell us. We're talking to Sam on a daily basis about what that number is going to be. And as soon as we know our number for this week, then we start talking about next week. And so I think that's the piece where we can all work together, is just to continue to advocate to get those doses out to public schools. And it's even different by county. And I think we brought that up here before too, that you're going to see different counties at different stages of this. And so, we would love to have just as many of those to get our folks in and through that process. And we know that the UIHC has capacity to be able to serve as many as we get. I mean, and we really believe that, and we think we could really get through our employees in a short amount of time if we had the actual vaccines. So it's not a matter of us being able to administer them. It's really just getting access to the vials and the doses.
Oh, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
Well, I didn't want to put everybody on the spot, but I know it's been asked by some staff members if we know how big each of those groups that we've put people into are. I know it said like the first group was roughly about how many vaccines we were going to be able to disperse last week, but groups get a little bit bigger as we move.
We have calculated out because we needed to for the county and also for our work with UAHC. But because, as Matt just talked about, it's something that we don't know from week to week. We haven't published those numbers because we don't want people trying to do the mental math to try to figure out exactly when they are up, and then if it wouldn't work out or the numbers would be low, that we would be delayed. And so we've published the information on our our different groups. And we have, as you alluded to, Sean said, we've gotten through this group in that weekly email, but we've not put out the specific numbers for each group. And we don't plan to do that. I will say that, the second group is slightly bigger than the first group, as is the third group. And so they do get a little bit bigger, which, if you look at the criteria, you could see that based on our staff population. But we feel like that we want to be transparent, but at the same time, we don't want to create more questions. And so we're trying to work with the county and the hospital, but we just aren't putting out those specific numbers.
Chase, I was on a Lynn County Public Health press briefing, I think on Monday, and they announced that the state was upping their dosage from 1,000 doses per week to 3,000. So they're tripling the amount that they're sending to Lynn County. Have we heard anything similar for Johnson County? And then part of what they also said is with that upped dose, the state is requiring them to get like 80% of vaccines in arms within X amount of days of receiving the dose, or they'll reallocate. Do we know if Johnson County Public Health, because it seems.
I've heard the second half of that about this push from the state about percentage of doses in arms. In my conversations with the county, I've not talked to them about what they're hearing from the state in terms of a specific number of additional doses. We did hear that for the first couple of weeks in February, there was going to be a percentage increase for a couple of weeks, but at least I've not heard anything permanent. Matt, you might have had some other conversations and not to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I would say from conversations with other superintendents in Lynn County that that distributions actually went slower than what we've been seeing in Johnson County with the Johnson County schools. And so some of that increase may have been to try to, to use a pun, put a shot in the arm in the process to get it moving along there in Lynn County. But I haven't heard anything about an influx to Johnson County that way. And I would also say anecdotally that 80% threshold is very low for the amount administered. And so that's a pretty low bar to hold ourselves to with kind of the scarcity of these vaccines right now. And so 80% is not necessarily a high standard. And, when we worked with UIHC through that, I think they have a much higher standard they're going to hold themselves to, and that we've tried to work to adhere to make sure that we're not wasting any of those vials of vaccine.
That's one of the things that they were actually very appreciative of in our first debrief is that even with the weather, we had 0 no-shows on Friday. So we did have a couple of late cancellations because of the weather, but we had an alternative list. And so we were able to call staff and they were, over there in 10, 15, 30 minutes, but we had absolutely 0 no-shows. And so folks that had to reschedule notified UIHC. And it goes to that point about not wanting to waste a single dose. And they were very impressed by our staff's commitment to making sure that if they couldn't get it, they ensured that somebody else, that one of their colleagues was available to get the vaccine.
Out of 411, 0 no-shows is wow.
Yeah, that's great. I do have one quick question. So I know that we were able to get everyone who raised their hand vaccinated in the first tier group. With the second tier, I know that they're larger. Is there sort of like a sub-tier way that we're selecting those staff members to get vaccinated? Is it random? Are we giving some thought to, I don't know, medical conditions, classroom sizes, or anything else?
No, within the tier itself, Ruthina, it's pretty random. We kind of looked at that before we set up the tiers, and you mentioned a couple other factors, and through our conversations with some health professionals and looking at other models, they really recommended less tiers is better because you get into more subjective criteria and it makes it harder to manage and more questions about, well, why did he get it or why did she get it and why didn't I get it? And so looking at it pretty randomly in terms of, how it came into the system. And so we're taking that information and then putting it in the schedule for UIHC.
And by how it came into the system, how they notified the district that they were interested. So there's a way to track that. Is that what you mean?
There is.
Okay.
So Sean, I just want to add a personal comment here. This may not be entirely appropriate, I guess, but I'm scheduled to get a vaccination this Wednesday. It's being administered by the University of Iowa. And I've given some thought about maybe trying to skip it, to which my youngest son replied, "I'll disown you if you do." So I'm going ahead with that. Just to be transparent.
Charlie, I appreciate the thought and I understand that. And you've brought that up before, and we've had other staff members bring that up as well. And our message continues to be the same, that like your son, we'll disown you because if you have an opportunity to get the vaccine, you just need to go ahead and get it. And that's really what we're telling folks. And people's hearts are in the right places. And I've seen it on display from our colleagues up and down our district staff, and it's awesome. But this is something that, you know, if we're truly all in it together, part of being in it together is that we all get the vaccine when it's offered to us, if we want it. And so I think that while your heart is definitely in the right place, getting it if you want it is the right thing to do on Wednesday.
Any other comments from directors or any other topics Matt and the team want to hit on this item?
That's it for our return to learn update, Sean. So unless there's other questions from board members, that was the conclusion of what we had for you this evening.
I'm looking around to see if anybody looks like they want to talk.
I should say, sorry, Sean, I know there was some requests for data around disaggregated data around COVID infection rates and some of that. And so I did want to respond to Charlie that we are still working on that. We don't have that ready to show, but that was a question I believe he asked last week at the meeting. And so we'll continue to work on that and we'll bring that back just as soon as we can too.
Good, thanks, Matt.
Yep.
All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is our legislative priorities and / update. I think Kristen did most of the work probably putting together our little flyer there. It looks very much like it did last year. And I know early on when we started looking at it, I was concerned that vouchers were going to get crammed through the legislature before we even had a chance to put this out. Fortunately, the House has gone a little slower on it than the Senate, I believe. So it's still there, but we can certainly add or remove or change anything that's in there. I don't know if Matt or anybody else had any comments to make on it before I just kind of throw it out there to anybody else.
No, I mean, the one comment I guess I would make is just, Brady referenced the chapter 20 piece in his opening comments, and we've continued to leave that in legislative priorities, and thankful to the board for that. And I think it's just a recognition too on some of the historical steps that have been taken here around public education in Iowa with the SSA that continues to show up because of the continual underfunding, the move to remove chapter 20 and change that bargaining process. And then now to this talking about vouchers. And so I just think we need to be very aware and open about what's going on at the state level in terms of public education and the road that it's on for Iowa. And it's not a good course. And so I think just as people are listening or as you're talking to constituents in the community, people need to be aware of what's happening with public schools in the state of Iowa and look to their neighbors about how this system has worked out. And, we're going to continue to do a great job. We had a conversation in cabinet this morning about how there's still great public school districts in a lot of those states that have been through something like this. But I would say just from a legislative priority standpoint to just take note of those and that this is a long, slow play of a really dangerous turn for public ed in the state.
So are there any comments or suggestions for some changes by any directors? I'm trying to remember, do we officially take a vote on this? I don't remember if we've done it in the past or just kind of give it our stamp of approval and call it good.
I don't know that you've actually approved it before, Sean, but I think if people are generally okay with the direction that's there and doesn't think that anything's missing, then of course we'll distribute them electronically. And typically we'd have the paper flyers to ask people to, go to the Capitol to advocate for, but we'll get it distributed electronically as long as people are okay with what's there.
I would say personally, I think everything that's in there is fantastic. If you're asking if there's something missing, I think we could probably have 25 bullet points in there. So there's plenty of things that are missing.
Right? Yeah.
But I think the ones that we have there are very important and top of mind. All right. A lot of silence from directors, so I call that tacit approval. See, they just got to say it, and then you get some head nods. I like it. All right. With that, let's go ahead and move on then. We had our, let's see. We had our public hearing on our underground electric easement earlier, so now we need to take action on it. So I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the underground electric easement at Liberty High School.
Second.
Any conversation? Any questions? All right, Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
Yay.
Thank you, Director Clausen.
It's not coming up for me either, so yay.
Thank you, Director Malone. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Your yay didn't sound as excited as JP, so you're gonna have to work on that.
I know I'm gonna have to work on that, but his is so funny.
I love an easement.
All right, our next action item is the bid form for the sale of Trek. It's not actually approving a sale or anything, but it is the form itself that we're going to put out there for bid. Are there any questions on that, or is there any context that anyone from the team wants to put there?
Yeah, I would like to say something here from the outset, Sean, and then maybe Chase or Dwayne might have some additional comments or the ability to answer questions for you. But when we originally got this back from legal, the date that is mentioned in there around the bid due date would be the 16th of February. And so any motion that the board would consider tonight, we'd like you to consider amending your motion to March 2nd for that deadline. And we think that would give an appropriate amount of time for contractors or individuals in the public to get an appropriate bid in. That time's kind of shrunk since we got that back from legal and then got it posted to a board agenda. So we would like you to consider that modification from what's in the current agreement in front of you there, but that's really what's there for you guys to consider tonight. We've had previous conversations around the sale of that property, and this would be the appropriate process to follow to get it posted and see what takers may be out there in the community.
Any questions or anything from directors? All right, I would entertain a motion with the amended date. I believe March 2nd was the date.
Okay,
So
I would
moved.
go ahead, Rethina.
Sorry, I just said so moved. Made it simple.
Second then.
All right, Kim, you got that with the amended date? All right. Any further discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote.
Online voting is open.
Yay.
Thank you.
I've been coming in and out, Kim, so it may not be coming up for me this time. So I'm a yay. Oh, there it is.
Thank you. And Director Malone?
Oh, yay. I
Thank you.
voted. Sorry.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, everyone. Next up is our Director Liaison report. Is there any things that directors would like to comment on that they've done? Any context or thoughts?
No, I was a virtual guest speaker for Liberty 9th and 10th grade students for their AVID program. And it was a great event, but I think what really was just the best part of it was they sent me thank you notes today. And maybe I'm just a big baby, but they made me cry. They were so sweet and thoughtful. So if any of those students are listening or the teacher, Jenny Mick, thank you so much for allowing me to be that virtual guest speaker.
Very nice. And if I'm not mistaken, I think at tomorrow's DPO meeting, the topic is AVID, and I think Jenny Mick is one of the speakers, if I remember correctly. So we can all go and make her cry. Any other things directors want to point out?
I'd just like to note that the Black Voices Project met last night, and Lisa and Matt were in attendance. And I want to commend Matt again for attending the Black Voices Project and other groups in the community. His presence is noted very favorably, and even though the discussion can get very pointed, very direct, very difficult, I still think it's a good thing for us as a district to have that representation there, and Lisa's as well. And I think Ruthina's attended before, and other members of the board as well.
Yeah, I am one of the reps with Lisa. I just could not attend last night.
Thank you for that, Charlie. Appreciate it. Why don't we go ahead and move on to agenda setting? And it seems like the appropriate time to remind everybody that we do have a work session after this board meeting. So that's the first thing that is coming up. And I think I'll mention it. One of the things that Lisa, I believe, is the chair of the operations committee. She had asked if we can have kind of a routine, just update like the first meeting of the month from the ops committee on future agendas. So we can do that. A little teaser for the work session. You'll see that there are future work sessions for the board to go over that stuff as well. So we'll try and fit some of those just kind of discussion updates, maybe the first meetings of the month with other discussion updates as well. But the draft agenda that we have on there for the 23rd is up. We have another public hearing along with all the regular stuff and our return to learn and equity updates. So it's pretty much the usual suspects there. So are there any things that directors think we need to have on the 23rd or any future meetings for that matter? All right, looks like not. So obviously if you come up with things later, we can try and figure out what agendas we can stick them in. I assume that we are going to stay on the same Zoom for the work session. Just want to make sure everybody has a chance maybe to, does everybody want a quick little break between meetings, or do we want to just power through?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right. So I'm going to get us back in 5 minutes. My clock says 6:28, so 6:33 is when we're going to come back. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll be right back in 5 minutes.